Shift Happens podcast.
Change is inevitable, and many times the shifts are planned. It might be a new career, a challenging project outside your comfort zone, or a new skill or educational degree. But as the pandemic has shown, change can also happen without warning, and it's up to us to adapt and thrive. My guests today are Adam and Helen Harmetz, who write candidly about life's many changes, the professional and the personal, on one of my favorite new blogs, Mind the Beet. The spouses are also Microsoft veterans, and they've got plenty of great advice for readers who are at a crossroads or looking to take an opportunity to the next level. I can't wait to learn more from Helen and Adam. Let's get to it.
Shift Happens podcast. Shift Happens podcast.
Welcome back to Shift Happens podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Raymond, Chief Brand Officer here at AvePoint and a modern workplace professional. I'm so excited for today's episode, where we'll be joined by Helen and Adam Harmetz. Hey gang, how's everybody doing?
Doing good today.
Great. Excited to be here.
Good. So why don't you do a quick intro and say hi to everybody? Let's start with Helen.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Helen. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first on this podcast. Super exciting. So yeah, I am a mother, a professional in tech, a wife, and currently I'm working at Guild Education, focusing on helping students, helping working adults pursue education in search of career mobility. Before that, I was at Microsoft for almost 10 years, working in both marketing and product. And before that, I had a fun stint in politics where I ran a bunch of campaigns. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Adam, why don't you say hi?
Hi, Dux. It is great to see you. It has been years since we've gotten on a podcast or video together. I think the last one we did was in Building 34 on the Microsoft campus a couple years ago. Great to see you. Great to be on the podcast. I'm a longtime Microsoftie. Been there 16 years. Supposed to be one and go back for a PhD, but here I am 16 years later. Just sort of really enjoyed working on something with others and that product management discipline. So I'm head of product for large parts of the SharePoint and Microsoft Viva experiences. I'm sort of a founding member of Microsoft Viva over in Microsoft land.
Yeah, Viva is exciting. We're going to talk about that in a second here. So I have to ask Helen, did you both meet at Microsoft?
Good question. We did not. We actually met at the end of our freshman year of college at UCLA. Go Bruins. Funny story. We did not really get along when we just met. So we were actually, maybe a little bit of political rivals. We ran against each other for a position. We don't need to get into who won and who lost.
I won, but whatever.
It's fine. Long lost history. And so we met at UCLA. So
awesome.
Ended up at Microsoft through different ways, different means.
I mean, I wouldn't have expected both of you fell in love because of a rivalry, but it's great. And I've been following your blog, Mind the Beet, especially in the last 18 months. It's just amazing with a lot of insights and learnings that you both share, be it as parents, as couples, as leaders in your respective organization. So I want to start with you, Helen. Like in the last 18 months, I know it's been a lot of change for everybody and a lot of adjustment. What are some of the key learnings for you now that the lines have been blurred around work and personal lives? And what are some of the tidbits or little nuggets that you've gained throughout this experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've all been learning through this experience, and what's true for us is obviously different for others. And so I think for me, once we made it through the initial, shock to the system of we're now working from home, school is no longer, happening in the way that we knew it. The key for me and then for us as a family was really to figure out how do we thrive? What's our new joy? What are our new routines and patterns that we need to establish? Like, for example, we were not gonna forego our children's education just because the schools were still figuring it out. So then we did our schedules and found learning time to support our kids' education, or we gave up on we could no longer do social lunches or get-togethers with friends or coworkers. So then we figured out what's the latest slew of apps and games and platforms we can use to stay in touch and to be connected. I started baking with my grandmother on FaceTime. It's probably going to be one of my fondest memories through the pandemic. Is I got to spend actually a lot more time with some of my loved ones just remotely.
That's awesome. And I see and I learn a lot of these points you made based on essentially the tips both of you shared in your blog. So one of the things I love about the blog is, there's a lot of blogs out there, life hacks for personal stuff or how to be a good leader for work stuff. But I think what's unique for the knowledge you both share is it's rolled into one, right? In this blog. So maybe Adam, can you tell us what kind of spawned this idea of sharing a lot of your life lessons and life learnings individually as a couple, personal work perspective? One of the recent posts you made was life doesn't have an instruction manual. I love that, right? Because it's just like these little quick tips, but I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to start doing that. So how did it all start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And probably like many people, we were looking to, feel a little more in control as a result of this pandemic, so much out of our control. And what can we do to sort of foster new hobbies, new things that we're doing that just sort of gave us a sense. And, synthesizing all this is hard. I personally love writing. I know Helen does too. And I remember talking about it with some sort of leadership group about this notion. I mentioned how much I loved writing, and then, and I sort of thought everybody did. And then, the leadership coach stopped and went around like, how many other people here, if they had an extra 10 minutes, would choose to write? And like nobody raised their hand. And it sort of made me realize like, oh, wow, like maybe I didn't think it was a hobby and I didn't think it was personal to me. And, the pandemic has just sort of made you realize these things that are more unique to you than you thought. And so, we started it. I also think it's a great chance for me to practice being vulnerable and practice making it, about me. Most of my first drafts are these sort of sanitized top 10 tip type of things. And I have to really sort of take another look at it and think about it. Helen, credit to you. You're the one that sort of realized that more or less we're the product here, right? Like this is a slice of life thing. Yes, we want to try to give good advice, but if we're not talking about ourselves, we're just not going to connect and get through. And I think the meta point of the whole blog is I think every generation tries to figure out what it means to be adults. So we try to use this phrase 21st century grownups. And so the blog's probably not for everybody, but if I had to say who it was for, people who are ready to try to figure out what it means to be a grown up. And obviously that's even, by that, I mean, take responsibility for yourself and for others. And you can be 22 and be ready to be grown up. You can be 50, it doesn't really matter. But that's probably the coordinating theme of it all. And not done through hopefully something super preachy, but just like our own experience, trials and struggles and successes and failures as we try to figure that out, and hopefully connecting with a couple other people who feel the same.
I love the first point you made, right? It's about being vulnerable and being open, and clearly it shows we're all work in progress. Nobody has it figured out. And one eye-opening realization for me as I read a lot of your work is here's Adam, here's Helen, leaders in their organizations, in their industry, but yet being open to things about, okay, here's how we parent. Here's little life hacks on, how do you put the toilet paper seat on toilet paper, right? Like, but that's what we experience day in, day out. How has this impacted, at least with people you work with or even your team as you share these things? Did they get a different perspective of you, or do they look at you differently now, Adam?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I certainly, let's be honest. I think we didn't choose something super focused for this blog. It's a little bit of like, how to be a grown-up's incredibly broad thing. And it's not just a parenting blog, not just a, life blog, not just a career blog. And, that if you read on the internet, they say you don't do that, right? Like be super focused and have a good hook. And we just didn't want to approach it that way, partly because we were learning and we wanted to cast a wide net. And partly is sort of, as you say, like clearly the people that read this most are the people we know or 1 or 2 degrees away from us. Like we want to talk it in terms of metrics, sort of not as many subscribers, but high open rates, right? Like we're looking for people that sort of know us pretty well, or at least want to get to know us. And so, yeah, I mean, I have, in the pandemic, I have found being more transparent and open with the team is just required. Many managers have taken on the role of being a bit of a therapist for their team, carrying burdens. And, there's definitely a lot of burnout to manage with that. And I think I talk about that with my leadership team all the time. But I do think, we always have someone out on pandemic leave or taking care of somebody or doing something, and just the ability to come and go, and know what's going on with the team and know what's going on in my head, has been super impactful. Like, I think it's created more of a sense of psychological safety with the team. And so I think that's been really great. And I used to do a little bit of this before the pandemic, but it was just within my team or just within Microsoft. And sort of taking that leap and doing it on the public internet, or, really having LinkedIn and Twitter be a source of it, was a real growth for me. And it was, it forced me to really crystallize what the learnings are beyond just like the immediate day to day.
And Helen, for you as a leader, as a result of sharing some of these insights, what kind of feedback have you gotten from your colleagues, people on your team? And is there anything that, as a result of this, that you've changed, or some new perspective you've gained?
So Adam and I are actually pretty opposite in many, many ways. Like, Adam's a little bit more reserved and thoughtful. He leads with his synthesizes his top 10 tips, and I'm like, everything kind of hangs out. My team, people around me, like, I'm very transparent. I'm a terrible liar. I turn bright red if I'm lying. Like, it's really, really obvious. So for me, it's actually been it's been such an honor and a great learning opportunity to meet in that middle a little bit of actually synthesizing and organizing my thoughts. And we work through these blogs every night. Like, our schedule is about we get to a first draft ideally by Friday night, Saturday morning. The other person reads it, gives feedback, and our feedback is actually pretty consistently the same. I tell Adam he needs to be more vulnerable. He tells me I need to synthesize better. And then we get to the output. So for me, it's been great as a way to just actually get organized and get more structured in my thinking, and put out resources that are interlaced with human stories to make them be more relatable and usable for people around me. So that's what I love about it. It's actually really vulnerable and hard to share things and put them out into the public eye, because we spend a bunch of time on it, and we have these conversations like, is this relatable? Is this too preachy? Is this too bossy? Is it too fluffy? Is it too concise? Is it too real? Is it not real enough? Because while we do mostly write for ourselves, we are hoping to strike the right tone and get the point across that we want to get across, because so much can get accidentally lost in translation. So it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to both work on it together and share it, and then get feedback and get a bunch of people at work asking, what are you going to write about this week? I think it's your turn. And we brainstorm some topics. And so, yeah, it's been great.
It's like Netflix, like, what's the next episode going to be? Or what's coming? In the way you're describing, Helen, the model on how both of you put this together and check on each other, this is the tech in me, it's a paired programming, a stream programming model, right? Like, you write the code, you QA, I'm going to write the code, I'm going to QA. So that comes out from both of your backgrounds.
And let me tell you, thank God for spell check.
There you go. Now, Adam, a lot of the things that both you write about or share reminds me too, where if you look at technology, right, we talk about Viva, at least from a marketing perspective, and I'm experiencing it now. It's like we talk about this employee experience, and really it's just bringing in all different facets of what an employee encounters, not just the documents we work on, the emails we send, or the internet we need to look at, but there's things like the Viva Insights. And then recently, I saw yesterday, the acquisition of Ally, so that we can help bring in OKRs in a more streamlined way. Can you kind of share and talk to our listeners about, at least at a high level, what Viva is, and then long-term vision on how Viva can bring in some of these human elements to day-to-day work, and really how to make everybody not just be more productive and really make work more human?
Yeah, Dux, that's I think you hit it right exactly on our goal state for Viva. I mean, Viva is an employee experience platform, so it's trying to create an entire category of tools and services and extensibility for exactly that, like putting employees at the center. And like we heard through the pandemic that people care a lot more about the experience their employees have and make sure they're attached to their organization. And it's a hard problem. As a product maker, I think it has made me way more in tune with the really deep business objectives and goals of the customers that I work with. I mean, I think when you look at the pandemic overall, you're gonna, the one of the key takeaways is pretty early. When Satya first, like 2 months into this, he said there's 2 years of transformation in 2 months, and now we're 2 years, and I'd say it's a decade of transformation within 2 years, and that's phenomenal. But then you think about, okay, so what's the result of that? The result of that is that IT is going to have more partners throughout the business for using technology, because all of a sudden a bunch of business decision makers and HR, they're more comfortable 10 years fast forward in comfort in talking about how technology can help with some of their business problems. Like none of the problems that Viva is talking about are new or existed only because of the pandemic. They're more urgent. And I think more people in the organization realize how much technology can partner with their business processes to help them. Uh, and yeah, for me, I been running SharePoint for a lot of while, building a knowledge management system with Viva topics, and that's great. But having to work way more with the Viva Insights team or our new colleagues and ally, like these are folks that fundamentally are looking at sort of data and metrics and have been more rooted in business value than sort of IT middleware type of thing. And bringing both of those together, I think is really going to be the generational trend in B2B SaaS. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Hopefully a little framing of how I think, our core thesis of how all this is going to play out.
That's a fantastic point. I think about what you mentioned where it accelerated digital transformation, but in parallel, it also accelerated cultural transformation, right? Because what we're seeing is not just even about using cloud-based or SaaS tools, but there's a lot of cultural change. And some organizations may feel like they're forced because they don't have a choice. But I think on the positive light, this is a great opportunity to leverage technology to make all those cultural transformation that a lot have been thinking about, but now it's quite possible and doable. And one of which, for example, is also the area of upskilling. So I know that's a core piece of Viva as well. It's a part of employee experience. And one of the things we're seeing, even in the news, right? There's news about, great resignations coming, or there's certain industries, people aren't going back to work. But then yet at the same time, in tech, a lot of people are upskilling to be a part of tech. So I wanted to ask you, Helen, are you seeing any trends around this, around upskilling and getting educated specific around tech sector perhaps, or is there any specific sector or areas that you see trends kind of bubbling up around being upskilled?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we are in a moment in time, especially in America, where there's a tremendous need for new type of workers we don't have today. Workers, like, we have jobs that are not being filled today, both in tech as well as in healthcare, and like it's really hard to find a dental hygienist right now. Really, really hard. Probably harder than it actually is to find a product manager, to be honest with you. And so the opportunity for and it's amazing because all the large employers are actually seeing it, especially employers of frontline workers that have hundreds of thousands of workers, that because of automation and the changing landscape that actually technology has oftentimes created, there's a lot of people who are going to need a new job in the next 5 to 10 years. So the urgency is so high to help American workers, professionals today, to find their next opportunity, both in their company and beyond. Yeah, so folks have a place to land tomorrow and in a few years. So quite a lot of, Walmart, Target, Amazon just made their big announcement about upskilling their workforce. So the time is now, and it's great to see large employers recognize this opportunity. And it's it's an honor to work in that space and help so many people pursue a career mobility.
And we're in this interesting juxtaposition, right? Where we see there's a surge in certain industries. So you mentioned Amazon, for example, people are doing more online shopping, but then fulfilling those delivery is a challenge because we see in retail, for example, I was expecting a package yesterday. So I just got a text message yesterday saying, hey, because there's a delay, and the delay is not even about the system is inefficient, but there's not enough workers, for example. I saw the news the other day where there's a bunch of ships or cargo ships just sitting out in California somewhere because there's not enough people or even technology to process these things. So you're right. I mean, be it tech or frontline workers or specific industries like healthcare, there needs to be a new wave of professionals and experts to help fulfill those roles.
Well, and I think that we talk about Viva being an employee engagement platform. I think providing a lot of employers are seeing providing educational opportunities as an employee engagement strategy as well, right? And that they're actually using that to attract workers to the opportunities they're offering.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I really love about Viva, right? Where if you think about learning today, for example, learning is not even about, I'm going to go take a training 3 days somewhere in front of a computer, focus on that, and I'm going to go back and start using. Well, that's still applicable in some cases, but in most cases, it's more just-in-time learning, contextual learning. There's that's happening. And then the other thing that's happening is the model we had before where, you want to do training? You go to this website. I mean, you still can, but what Viva can do is removing those context switching or as Jared Spataro would say, digital cul-de-sacs, but bringing it in to this one-stop shop. And the learning aspect of it, not only tapping into industry learning providers, but yet as an organization, you can provide your own learning, track those learning as a manager. You can look at and tie to insights, et cetera. So I think that is a game changer for a lot of organization.
Yeah, no, I think a lot about it from product making. Like, what's your core thesis? What are you contributing to this conversation? And you're right, there's a lot of existing learning providers and Viva Learning integrates with them, but you're right, it's in that flow of work and experimenting with social and micro training and embedding it into your workflows that I think is really going to be where there's a ton of opportunities that customers are going to teach us about how to use Viva Learning for that.
So Helen, if we think about the future, right? So there's a lot of talks around hybrid workplace. It's going to be the future of work, new world of work, but really it varies from organization to organization, different countries. What advice would you offer to leaders and managers out there on how to navigate this new world where certainly we have to not only focus on work, but we focus on our colleagues, our team. We think about upskilling. Any thoughts you can share as we prepare for this new world of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the upside, if there's such a thing, from the pandemic is that we learned that we can get a lot of work done not in the office. And then we also miss a whole bunch of stuff that does happen in the office. But I think it has given us an opportunity to crystallize what it is that we should do in the office and what should we, or not even the office in quotes, together versus what are we perfectly capable of doing apart. So I think the advice I'd give to managers and to companies starting out, like taking a hardline position is no longer going to be that acceptable. If you want to take a position of your employees must be in the office from 9 to 5 days a week, like you better have a really good reason as to what outcome that's going to drive for you that you don't think you can achieve otherwise. And if not, then like attracting the right talent and the right folks, like you should focus on what you need from them, what success looks like, and then work backwards from there, and then figure out what the employee needs. If they need to be working from home, or they need to be working flexible hours, and still can achieve the business goals that are set out, like everything should be on the table. And both managers at a micro level should enable that as much as possible, and then leaders at a macro level should do that as well, because the world has changed, and I don't think we can go back to where we were 2 years ago. We should define our new normal.
If I could contribute a hypothesis of where the puck is going as we leave the pandemic, The Economist wrote this wonderful article about looking at 1,000 years of history and what is society like after pandemics are done. And there were 3 big takeaways. One was that there's an economic boom, but not too bad because everybody's still a little skittish, so it's actually pretty cool. 2, there's social unrest. That is really bad, but not the focus of today's podcast, so we'll put that aside. And the third was just this notion of risk-taking and sense of adventure that seems to grip society as pandemics, as they recede. And, I thought a lot about that as I am trying to navigate my own team. We actually did a reorg over the summer that was sort of designed to get the existing team to recommit, to look at where there is a sense of adventure and a little bit more risk-taking, like on the margin, let's fund a little more of those 0 to 1 efforts, and really make sure that people are looking for some newness and for some challenge. And really, if they're looking to take risks, this is a, great place to be able to do that. I think that's going to be sort of not for everybody, but a theme that people have, that I really think managers should get ahead of and think of. Certainly, I've been thinking about it on my own team.
So Adam, I want to expand and unpack that further. So you talk about risk taking, and I'm sure your organization is quite large. You have a lot of folks that, rolls up to your leaders, and I'm sure you mentor some of individual contributors as well. So for our listeners out there, especially if they're just starting their career or they're not in that leadership position yet, right? So what advice can you offer when you talk about risk taking, or if they want to make shift happens in a positive way for their career? What are some of the things that they can do, again, in this new framework of work?
Yeah. I guess I'd have sort of 2 pieces of advice. One is definitely for earlier in career, and one is for maybe anybody. Early in career, just like a product, I would say fit over scale. Some of the unhappiest people I know are people that just, didn't really ask whether they loved their job, and they just tried to climb the career ladder because that seemed good, scale it up. And really spending early in your career finding what gives you joy, finding what you're good at, and honing that, and making a decision about, okay, this is something I don't like and I don't want to do anymore. And this is the stuff that gives me joy and passion. Too many people skip that step. And I think, I think it's incredibly important, especially as we enter a more dynamic, post-pandemic workforce and lots of opportunities. And then I heard this quote this week generically about managing careers. And it was like, make your company work for you, not you work for your company. And it's easier to say than it is to do. But, and it goes back to what we want out of employee experience, right? Like, it is about making sure that value exchange between you and your company is positive for you. That is why you should make sure you're working for a company that invests in training, that allows you to have the time to be able to learn and grow both on the job and elsewhere, or whatever it is that grows you and your career. And that is table stake. And you should be thinking about that and creating a plan for it.
Boy, there's so much goodness in our conversation. And I want to make sure for our listeners who haven't checked their blog, make sure you look it up, Mind the Beet. I'll put the URL in our show notes. But before you wrap up, right, I would have to ask, do you have a favorite beet recipe, both of you?
Oh, just one?
That is all Helen.
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, the most classic beet recipe, I'm Russian, so I'm an immigrant. And so it was definitely there's a famous Russian soup. It's called borscht. There's a vegetarian one and a meat one, which is basically like a beet-based soup. It's very red. And so, yeah, you can, very well known, Russian staple. So you definitely look that up. And then, I do so many things with beets. I roast them and put them into, salad with olive oil and balsamic. I shred them and add garlic and nuts and add some mayonnaise to it. Like you can have beets at our house anytime, all day long. So I've baked with beets too. You can actually make like really good baked goods with beets as well. So there's just so many things.
Fantastic. Since Adam, you don't have a favorite recipe you can share, how about if there was one blog post y'all did, what's your favorite one, and you would love to share with our listeners?
Let's see. We've done a lot of good ones. Helen's post on how she transitioned jobs has been one of our more popular ones as she went from big tech to growth stage startup. And that was just a great chance to synthesize both sides of that equation. I'd recommend that one. I just did one on I called it burnout and boredom and that spectrum, as if I was writing to my future historians 20 years in the future about what should a manager think about during this time of crisis. And I don't think it's perfect. It wasn't a playbook. It was just like my journal of it, which was I thought, seemed to resonate in terms of like that style of writing.
Fantastic. Well, both, thank you so much for spending some of your precious time with our listeners, and definitely great job keep up the great work. And I won't be surprised if one day this will be a book or a Netflix series or even a podcast, right?
Thank you, Dux. It's so great to chat with you.
Thanks. This was great.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Adam. And for everybody else, thank you again for listening to another episode of Shift Happens. Until the next episode, take care and be safe.
Shift Happens Podcast.
Thanks for listening. As you face new changes in your life, consider the advice from Helen and Adam. What new platforms, technologies, or strategies can you employ to make work for you? If you're a leader or a manager, are you offering flexibility and the right tools to help your teams navigate this period of massive change? Consider tools like Microsoft Viva, which can leverage learning modules and insights to benefit the enterprise. And if you're the one considering a change, ask yourself, how can you upskill yourself to make your goals a reality? These are just a few takeaways, of course. I invite you to read more at themindthebeat.com. If you like today's podcast, please leave a review for the Shift Happens podcast on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you use to listen. We'll see you next time.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.